how do you reconcile what's happening in the world while being a writer that's trying to usher in goodness, beauty, change?
The question for me is, why is Revelation in Scripture? Like, what's the point of the book?
You also worked at a megachurch.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of controversy around megachurches. A lot of big churches, bad things happen. But you seem to have a bit of a different take on this whole thing. All right, guys, today I am with a writer and editor who is a Christian that has been able to infiltrate the big five behind mainstream media. We're going to explain what all that means in a minute. But if you didn't know, the entire publishing world that goes on to influence a lot of the stuff that's coming out is ran by 5 major big corporations, and they print all of the books that are pretty much in all the bookstores and have a lot of influence in terms of what's happening in the cultural zeitgeist around the type of stuff that's being released. Well, our guest today was able to infiltrate this world and now is a part of one of the big 5. And he's an accomplished writer and editor and actually helps other writers get their foot in the door in the publishing world. So without any further ado, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Will Anderson. Thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
Okay, so the entire premise around writing is generally to usher in goodness and beauty and something positive and beneficial. The use of words to tell stories, right?
Yeah.
What story do we ultimately live? Before we get into kind of like what the big 5 is and media and all that sort of stuff, you're a Christian, you love Jesus. Mm-hmm. You can't deny that there's craziness that's happening all over the world today.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile what's happening in the world, what seems to be this like structural issues with corporations and institutions, seems to be getting darker, more depraved, while being a writer that's trying to usher in goodness, beauty, change into this dark world? How do you reconcile those two? And then we'll kind of get into more of like your writing, your story, what you do with other writers and all that good stuff.
Yeah, totally. So you're right. I think a lot of the words coming out of not just publishers, but anywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, YouTube, social media, in any age, like even before the digital age, the way that the world works is there's always darkness. There's always lies. There's always things being spread that aren't true. And that's one of the ways that God calls us to be present in the world is to speak truth and to point to the beauty that is there. And so I think a lot of people want to look at the world and only see darkness, and we have to acknowledge it. We have to level with it. But as someone who works for a major publisher, as you said, for one of the big 5, I also see the other side. And on the inside, there are those that aren't spewing lies and deception. There are those that really want to help people with their words. And God has called them, like in this season, in this time, in this place, to speak things that are helpful, that are true, that are uplifting, and that help people navigate the darkness, especially when they feel like they're just surrounded by it on all sides. So yeah, those people are there, and that's part of what I think God has called me to do, is to help elevate those voices. You're one of those people. So we're working on a book together, your first book, and the hope is that that's going to be released into the world and give people hope.
Yeah. What would you say to the person that goes, well, the world is too far gone. It's like Jesus is coming back. Everything is going to burn and everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Why even try to bring in goodness? Why even try to tell better stories? Why try to build better culture?
Yeah, my first answer would be look at Jesus and look at his life. If you want proof that we're to engage with a broken world, what better proof than the fact that he came to earth? He left heaven to dwell here. He was born, Scripture says, in the fullness of time or at just the right time. But if you look at the first century when he walked this earth, it was extremely dark. A lot of the freedoms that we enjoy, at least here in the States, were not available to people. And yet he walked around healing and speaking life. And a lot of the places that he went, people pushed back and hated him. And we ultimately killed him because of what he said and did. But then Jesus says, come and follow me and serve as I have served and shine as lights. He calls his disciples the light of the world. And so, again, I think there's a naive way to approach being a follower of Jesus where we don't acknowledge the darkness or we choose to quarantine ourselves from it. But Jesus calls us to engage with the world. And one of the primary ways we do that is with our words, whether that's the words that we speak, even the words that we think, the words in our heart, and certainly like words on the page. So yeah, that would be one thing I'd say is look at Jesus. The other thing is that he promised to be with us. So he promised that as we engage with our neighbor, as we love people, maybe who don't even want to be loved, that we are not on the losing side and we are not in this alone. And so he's given us his Spirit, which promises to give us the words that we need to speak in the moment. And that brings great comfort, you know? And just looking at the story of Scripture and how many people who have followed God and loved him have existed in really dark times. So I completely reject the narrative that says things are worse now than they've ever been.
Okay.
I think those people haven't done their homework and haven't looked at history. Things are bad, absolutely, but they've always been. And God has always been faithful, and he will be faithful today like he was then.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that.
Yeah. As a writer, I'm curious your take on this, and I don't want to go super deep, but it seems like we're living through different chapters of Revelation, right? Like there's like natural disasters, earthquakes. In Matthew 24, Jesus talking about war, rumors of war. It really seems like this is a unique time in history, right? But then there are those who would point to the fact that even Revelation seems to have been written, at least in part, addressing some of the things that were happening in their climate, meaning that, yes, some of it is for the future when Jesus returns, but a lot of it was around even the 666 thing. They say if you translate it originally to the numbers, that's actually referencing Nero, and it was code for Nero. I actually think the language may even not be 666, but like 616, I think, was the original. So as a writer, like when you read Revelation and you see what we're living through today, what do you make of that? Do you see some of the partial preterist position that, some of this stuff may have already happened, this end time stuff is definitely coming, but it's not as if we're literally living through the book of Revelation. That some of that was contemporary to what John was going through while he was writing it.
Yeah. Man, we're diving into it now.
Deep.
Yeah. So the question for me is, why is Revelation in Scripture? Like, what's the point of the book? Why did God give it to us? I think the misleading answer that sometimes we get sucked into is that Revelation exists so that we can know the future and avoid those bad outcomes. But what it often does through that lens is it creates more fear and, forces people to make predictions that they probably shouldn't. I think one of the main thrusts of the book of Revelation is to give God's people hope that though evil does exist and it's pretty dark, it's pretty visceral, despite all of that God is in control and that he wins. So like some of the big takeaways for me would be Jesus is coming back, God wins, and then get busy. Like he's given us work to do, so we don't have to be afraid, And then in terms of, is Revelation talking about the future? Is it talking about now? Is it talking about the first century? I don't want to get overly technical with it, but there's a concept known as double fulfillment of prophecy. And it's like, if you just picture the prophet like in his day and he's looking ahead and he's seeing these events, it's like he's looking at a mountain and he's just describing the mountain. He's describing what he sees. But as we know from mountain ranges, like he can't see it, but from behind that mountain, there's another one and then another one and then another one. In other words, that prophet was only seeing maybe what was going to be fulfilled in the first century. That's the first mountain. But God can then fulfill that same prophecy again in another age. And maybe that's where we are today. And he's going to fulfill it. There's a third mountain even behind that one that he's going to fulfill at the very last days. And so that's one way that theologians and scholars try to describe like how so much in Revelation seems to have already been fulfilled, but then at the same time, how we're still expecting it to be fulfilled, right? So it's almost like God can use the same prophecy multiple times throughout history. And in a sense, like every Christian since Revelation was written has been living in that reality from that perspective.
Yeah, that's really good. We were earlier talking about living as exiles in Babylon. And of course, that language is used in Revelation, Babylon, the whore of Babylon, this sort of language. Yet, the exiles in Babylon is a reference to what we see in the book of Jeremiah, which some would say is foreshadowing a lot of what's happening in the apocalyptic literature. But what we see in Jeremiah and the instruction that the children of Israel have to live is that they're not to flee, that they're to stay, to pray for the peace and prosperity of the land. I'm specifically referencing Jeremiah 29. They're there to plant gardens. They're there to think multi-generationally. Do you kind of view Jeremiah as a potential prescription, Jeremiah 29 specifically, as a potential prescription for how Christians should think about living in this modern Babylon era today?
Yeah, I totally do. And the reason is because Peter literally describes followers of Jesus as exiles in this world. And so he picks up on that theme. He says, as exiles and foreigners, referring to Christians. So there's an expectation like those in the Old Testament in Jeremiah that were taken away to Babylon. There's an expectation that we are not in our natural home, that we are awaiting a kingdom or the promised land, whatever imagery you want to use, heaven. And so, there's an expectation that while we're here, what should our mentality be? And I love that piece in Jeremiah because it was unexpected, shocking to them, really. They were like, when do we get home? When do we get out of this discomfort? When do we get to kick off the shackles and go back to life as it was? And God's response was, that's not the plan. My plan for you is to actually stay, build houses, do good work with integrity, raise families, and to seek the welfare and prosperity of this city that you were exiled in. And that must have hit them so hard, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to pull up the passage right here for those folks that are like, what is he talking about? This is the passage, Jeremiah chapter 29. And here, right before it says, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile. And then it goes on, verse 5, build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. So the increase in number there is very interesting. Increase in number there, do not decrease. And then this is to me the punchline also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And then he doubles down. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. And there's additional prophecy here. I love that passage. I think that's really interesting. And so you're saying that Peter is kind of doing this throwback and this callback to this passage of being exiles in Babylon.
Totally. Because that mentality, the exile was a traumatic, life-altering experience for God's people that was like in their blood. Like they couldn't shake the remnants of that experience even centuries later. So the New Testament ties that experience to what it's like to follow Jesus now. I mean, he was killed. He was rejected by the powers of the world. And he says, expect the same treatment, expect the same opposition. And so I think thinking of ourselves as exiles, as followers of Jesus, it does a couple of things that are helpful. One, it like creates realistic expectations. Like we live in an age that is totally addicted to comfort and convenience, and I love them as much as anybody. But what scripture helps us realize is like, no, there's going to be times when your faith, it feels like the world is squeezing you, and when it's really uncomfortable and it's going to cost you something. And in those moments, it's not a warning sign on the dash that you veered off the course of God's will, which is our first instinct. We're like, shoot, I gotta get back to comfort. I must be doing something wrong that God's allowing this to happen. And scripture says, no, you're in exile. Like this discomfort actually confirms that you are walking with Jesus. And so there's just great comfort in that.
Yeah.
The other thing is we live in a time where it's like we're pushing back a lot on culture. It's us versus them. this just shatters that. It's like, seek the welfare of your like religion hating, Jesus rejecting neighbor. You know, like their life should be more blessed because you live next door or you work in the office next door, whatever it is, right? Like, seek the welfare and the peace of all people, and be a conduit of God's common grace, which just is the fact that God shows kindness to those that love him and those that hate him. And we're meant to bring that wherever we go, that grace, which I think is beautiful.
I love that. You also worked at a megachurch.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of controversy around megachurches, a lot of bad things that are said around megachurches. Oftentimes the churches that have the biggest scandals that everyone kind of talks about in the zeitgeist, whether that's a Hillsong, you know, whether that's Carl Lentz situation, fill in a blank, it's usually going to be someone attached with a mega church. There's multiple situations within Dallas for whatever reason of Robert Morris and all these just really messy situations. And people keep going, well, see, big churches, bad things happen, right? But you seem to have a bit of a different take on this whole thing.
Yeah, so power is super intoxicating. It's one of the classic drugs of the human condition. So like, we struggle to handle power when it's in our hands. I don't disagree with that. I mean, you can't argue with the headlines. What I would say is, for every big headline of a major mega church pastor that has gone down, there's 20 small churches experiencing the same thing, but there's just not enough people there to make waves in the same, like, it's not national news, it's local news. So abuse of power exists everywhere, and it's not just in the church, obviously, but I know we're talking about churches. So again, I go back to where God is calling someone to lead, and he's just built some people to lead large organizations. Like, that is how they're wired and gifted. And that's a beautiful thing. So my experience working at a mega church is that the structure was not my jam at all. It felt very impersonal to me.
What did you do at a mega church?
So I worked in family ministries, kind of overseeing discipleship.
Okay.
And like, I'm a pretty relational person. So it was like, just the volume of volunteers coming in and out over multiple services in a weekend was dizzying to me. I was like, wait, I want to get to know these people. I like want to take them out to lunch, but there's just not time. It's like, when one service ends, the next one's beginning. It's like boom, boom, boom. You're saying goodbye pretty much right when you've like greeted these people and they're out the door. And the same is true of the students, right? And the children that we're working with. It's just like so fast paced. So that was hard for me. But I also had opportunities to like sit with leadership, 4 or 5 people, you know, more intimate settings, whether it was talking about sermons, planning for that weekend services. And I got to see firsthand like the integrity, the giftedness, the wisdom of these pastors. And so it's a both and, you know, like, that model may not have been for me, but it does give me hope to know that, man, these people love Jesus, and whether I agree with the model 100% or not, or it would be my preference, it gives me hope to see. And that's probably a better point than the first one I made, which is that for every headline of a scandal, there's 100 more pastors faithfully slogging it out, dying to themselves, serving their people, being content with no platform, no recognition, and they will breathe their last breath having poured out their life for their people. But that's never going to be reported in the news. And we were talking about Josh Howerton because he likes to post about this kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, shouts to Josh Howerton.
Yeah, and he makes a great point. And I think people push back on that because it's like, well, you're dismissing all the terrible things that happen in churches and the abusive leadership. No, we're not dismissing it. We're just saying that's not the full story. And there's a lot of people that are faithfully leading in those bigger spaces.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting, you know, you mentioned the church when Constantine comes to faith, yet the first what would you say, first 100 years of the church? It was a lot of it was in homes and small and intimate. And, and so you see God moving, and it's a both and. People getting radically impacted, worldviews change, class systems being disrupted, which made Christianity very appealing. And then later, as Constantine comes to the faith, now the church is meeting in buildings, and now it continues growing, right?
Yeah.
And so could you kind of speak into some of that and how we see both in church history?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So to the person that would say, hey, small church is the way that, like, keeping churches smaller is how we stop the spread of toxic leadership or abuse, hypocrisy, then open up Corinthians and take a look at all the crazy stuff that was going on in that church, right? People sleeping around, neglecting the poor, being divisive and choosing one leader over the, like, it was a total mess. So you have a church like that, just in serious need of help. But then, yeah, as you were saying, you know, when Christianity became like institutionalized on a global scale through Rome, suddenly you had it being forced upon people in a way that was violent and one would argue evil. And so, yeah, there you have examples of both. It's like, even in house churches, leadership can be abused. Even in large national or corporate settings, it can be abused. Like it lives everywhere. And so the call is really to look at how Jesus led and to take seriously his servant leadership, whether you're leading 10 or 10,000.
That's good. That's good. You've written quite a bit for Gospel Coalition. One of your most popular articles, I want to pull it up here, is very controversial. All right. Very controversial. I'll pull it up here on the screen. It is called Beware the Christian Pitch to Join Multi-Level Marketing.
Yeah.
So you don't have a problem with big institutions. You don't have a problem with corporations, but you definitely laid out this argument against multi-level marketing.
Yeah.
Walk me through some of this article and kind of your issues with multi-level marketing, how pervasive it's become in the church, and almost kind of like a false church.
Yeah. No, right on. So the first thing I would say is that I didn't set out to write about this. I didn't go looking for this topic. It came looking for me.
Okay.
And so the backstory, I think the very first time, it was actually a guy that I had served with in this ministry I was leading, and I ran into him and his wife at a coffee shop, and he was like, hey, I'm doing this business thing. I have a mentor, and I'd love to meet for coffee and tell you more because I think this could be a great job opportunity. And I was kind of weighing my options vocationally at that time. So anyways, I meet up with him, had a super awkward, strange exchange. Like my biggest regret is that I brought my wife.
Oh no.
Yeah. So me and my wife, we met with him and his wife.
As like a business opportunity?
A business opportunity. And we show up and they're like dressed to the nine, like full suit, dress. I literally asked them, hey, are you going to a wedding? And they're like, no, we like to look nice for meetings.
Okay.
And it was kind of like making a point, you know? Yeah. And so we get into this meeting and he tells me, hey, look, this opportunity, which I can't really explain to you, is the equivalent of a $200K a year job.
Red flag. This opportunity that I can't explain to you.
And shout out to my wife because she was actually much more direct and sniffed out the shadiness of this immediately and was asking questions. And it was me who was kind of like, hey, like, Jill, it's going to be fine. I want to hear more about this $200K a year job, you know?
Yeah.
But anyways, they would kind of just literally like laugh off these questions like, that's cute that you want to know more, but and then they gave us sort of an ultimatum and they handed us a book and said, if you can read this in 1 week, we can move forward in the process. Otherwise, this isn't for you.
Whoa.
So we take
this is a new tactic. I haven't heard of this.
Yeah.
If you could read this book in 1 week, we can move
So they're
forward.
creating urgency. Yeah.
What was the book?
All I remember is it was a business book, but I was at lunch with my wife afterwards, and we opened the book, and the first thing I see is my best friend Donald Trump says.
Oh, okay.
That's all I can remember about the book. I don't know. I don't really know. As someone who knew Trump in business and had written a book, nothing about Trump in the story. But yeah, so we said no, obviously, and we turned it down. And from that point forward, I've been pitched in random places, probably 5 or 6 times at coffee shops.
Wow.
At the grocery store with my wife, at a farmer's market, after church, like getting lunch with people, at parks.
Whoa.
These are all true stories.
It's a lot of stuff. You're in Orange County, so maybe this is something in the air.
Something about me screams, this dude wants to be a multi-level marketer.
Yeah.
To the point that I've developed kind of a routine and a response that I genuinely hope honors these people, but totally diffuses their methods. So like it's been at least 10, if not more times, that I've been approached. So the more that it's happened and the more that I've seen patterns, I think an important caveat here is that multi-level marketing is not evil in and of itself. Like if you want to sell things and if you want to build a team, great. Like that's a viable way to make a living. Where I get cautious and where I push back is the methods that are used and the culture inside of some of these organizations, the way that they treat people, the promises that they make that I would say they don't deliver. And probably my biggest concern is how they co-opt Christian discipleship language to pull people in and to market their business as discipleship. I'm not saying that you can't disciple people as an employee or within your business. But when you conflate the family of God with how you make money, I think it just muddies the water in a way that leaves people hurt. And so I have close friends that were deep into MLM who have told me so many stories about how they were treated, the immense pressure that was put on them. Like if I can just be real, I was just talking to your team about your work rhythm, the way that you treat them, how many days a week they work, sort of the margin you give them. And you guys work really hard here, but you've created a culture of health where you're caring for your people. And a lot of what I've heard from MLM is the exact opposite. It's you have to listen to this many hours of content every week. You have to attend these meetings that go late into the night. People are looking over your shoulder, like breathing down your neck. Like it's actually a really toxic environment. And then when you add in like, oh, by the way, this is how we honor God and this is our way of discipling people. It's pretty toxic stuff.
Yeah. So I actually did an MLM a long time ago. I'll tell you about that.
Here we go. Here we go.
Which is kind of embarrassing in hindsight. But let's go over this article because you wrote this article. And you talked about these different recruiting tactics. Right. And so there's 3 here. Love your family well. More money means more mission. And you need purpose, calling, meaning. A few proof texts about the benefits of wealth. You need better mentors. Recruiting builds relationships. Charity and clarity. Let's go over some of these. So you mentioned I think you mentioned the first one. Love your family well. A friend trying to recruit me into MLM presented this poignant picture. Imagine being a husband who gives his wife the best of his attention rather than the exhausted leftovers after work. This is so gross, man. This is so gross.
Yeah, this is actually a quote from a meeting that I had with someone in MLM. And he's like, look, man, like you don't have to give your wife and kids. Funny thing was I didn't even have kids then. But now I do. And he was like, look, the system's broken. And we come home exhausted, giving the people we love the most the fragments of our energy and attention. Wouldn't you want a better life? And the irony of that now, years later from that conversation, and now having so many friends within the system, is that it's just a lie. He had this whole vision of life that, man, you put in some real hard yards now for a couple years, and then you have all this margin and freedom later and for the rest of your life. Like you retire in your 30s, like this is the vision they have. This is what their mentors are promoting and what they did. And I have a couple problems with that. First, it dishonors those that are in situations that don't afford that. So I actually think part of God's call in our lives is to work hard, and even when we're exhausted, to serve our spouse, to love our kids, to get after it, even when we're tired. Like, we pour out our lives and we work for, work-life balance. We work to be healthy physically, spiritually, emotionally. Like, we get sleep, we eat well, we do all the things we can. But the reality is, like, some people have to work 2 jobs. Some people have to pull the night shift, and that is the reality. And MLM paints this utopian lie that you can have it all, that you can work hard for a little bit and then take it easy for a long time. And I just think actually that's selling people a false vision, because maybe where God has you working your night shift and still giving your all to love your family is a fragrant offering to him.
That's good.
Is a blessing to him, and is an example to other people of what it looks like to follow Jesus. Retiring in your 30s kind of sounds boring to me, to be honest. I don't want to retire in my 30s. Well, I'm almost out of them, so I don't think it's going to happen. Anyways, so loving your family well is one of the main talking points that I've heard. One of the best stories I've ever heard, like, because I've kind of mentored some younger guys at my church who get hit up at the gym by MLMers. We have good conversations. But one of my buddies, he's like early 20s. He was approached by an MLMer and decided to grab coffee. And I just happened to talk with him the day before. And so I checked in with him after he had gone to coffee. And one of the lines that this guy said to him was, I mean, do you want to shovel poop for the rest of your life?
Jeez.
Or do you want to have this incredible, like, work hard now, retire early life? But he literally was like, do you want to shovel poop for a living? Like, does that sound like a life? And the best part was, my buddy is from Northern California, where they have ranches, and had literally shoveled manure as a job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so he was like, actually, man, I've done it, and it wasn't the end of the world. So
it's not that bad, bud.
I just love, like, this extreme, stupid example,
that's good.
Was something he had actually done in his life. So
this is good. You said the idea that traditional work depletes family health is reductionistic. If everyone believed this, we have no teachers, bank tellers, construction workers, grocers, and all others. That's so good. Okay, so more money means more mission. This is another one that's, I think, dangerous, because it definitely makes it seem like the only way you could be on mission is if you can earn more money. And money definitely opens up tools and flexibility and other stuff. But there are people that do amazing stuff for Jesus that are middle-class people. And go ahead. Or poor people.
Poor.
Yeah. And there are middle-class people who never earn a huge wage per year, but because they're diligent, they will retire with dignity and stability. So unpack some of this and just kind of some of the tension here.
Yeah. So a lot of this comes from 1 or 2 conversations I actually had. And what was pitched was, hey, if you can accrue hundreds and thousands, whatever, millions of dollars, then you free up your time and you have resources to be generous. You can serve your church or missions or just your neighbors in ways that you couldn't. And it's totally reductionistic, because there are bank tellers who love Jesus, who are called to do what they do as a means of blessing the world and glorifying God. Like, the way that they interact with customers, the way that they do their work with integrity matters to our world. Same thing with teachers and construction workers. So to say that retirement somehow kickstarts true mission and having the financial means, to actually serve God, like, you have to store up all this cash. I mean, take your pick of things Jesus said that contradict this. And they anticipated this objection. So I remember this one guy was like, he quoted a proverb about how, God blesses the righteous with wealth. But that's just a proof text. That's using one verse and trying to stack it against a wall of other verses. I mean, Jesus talked more about money and its dangers than he talked about hell itself.
Yeah.
So it's Jesus had wealthy patrons in his corner that helped fund his ministry, that supported him. But he warned about, the dangers of wealth more than probably anything else.
Yeah. I've gone through and read a lot of the scriptures of Jesus talking about wealth, this is kind of where I've landed, is like, wealth can be very dangerous. And I don't think someone should set out for the sake of just wealth. However, being effective, useful to a community through a product or a service that actually helps people is a good venture. And then if wealth comes as a byproduct of that, then that's good. But if you're setting out to just get wealth and just become rich and just have things, materialism, or status, power, I think, generally speaking, that tends to be very shallow and will lead you astray. But if you're setting out to genuinely help people and solve a problem, and then wealth is the byproduct of that, which, by the way, is regional, meaning that like that is often the case in the West. If you're trying to help people be of use, be of utility, solve a problem, you will be rewarded with that in the West, but you won't always be rewarded in other places of the world. Look at missionaries or pastors, like the most, in my opinion, the most useful, beneficial, helpful, yet not allowed in parts of the world. So I think that's the tricky part, is like, you could do the same thing in different parts of the world and be rewarded totally differently. Yeah.
It's a really, it's a narrow-minded view of the world, and it cuts out like, that could work potentially here in the West, to accrue all this wealth and then serve, and do mission type work for the rest of your life. But I would also say research about multi-level marketing is pretty like across the board. It's not successful, and most people burn out or give up, or even worse, stay in it and suffer financially and emotionally sometimes before getting out. But this does not pan out financially for the majority of the people doing it. And they don't want people to see that. They want to show the car you get when you reach a certain level. They want to, there's always another carrot dangling, right? There's like those, the select few that make it, they don't show like what it's really cost to get there. They just show you the reward. But I would say from the personal relationships that I have, and this isn't prescriptive necessarily, but from the people that I know, by the time they achieved any level of success, it was no longer enjoyable because of what it costs to get there. And the minute they earned something, they were thrown up on a stage and commanded to boast about it and to act like they're the happiest person on earth, when actually inside they were exhausted and depleted. And if they were really honest with themselves, wanted to like get out.
Well, I think that the tricky part is, if you are working for a product that you genuinely love, and you're like, hey, it makes sense for me to buy this product at wholesale, to store it, and to sell it at a markup. I like the product. I use the product. I like the discount of the product at wholesale. And I don't mind selling it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think where it becomes wrong is when the product isn't the main sales pitch. It's the opportunity to sell the product for other people to sell the product. I think that's extremely sketch. And so again, I'll tell you about my experience in a moment and where I landed with it. This next one is interesting. You said you need better mentors, right? Most multi-level marketing, most multi-level marketers laud? What is that word? Laud.
Weird editor word.
Very, very weird word. Laud their mentors, usually a married couple with staggering financial accomplishments, then offer you access to these gurus if you jump through the required hoops.
Now that's me with some straight talk, right? No one's literally saying like, hey, you got to jump through these hoops. I'll grant you access. But that's absolutely what it is. So the idea is that, hey, I know these people. Oftentimes they're, 30-something retirees, but not always. I've heard some mentors are in their 50s, 60s. But the idea is that, hey, if you want to learn how to do this, if you want this lifestyle, if you are believing in this vision that I'm casting, then you can't just email my mentor. Like there are steps you have to take to get into the circle. So MLM is extremely based on hierarchy and like due diligence. Like you have to put in your time. You have to prove yourself to move up. And so if you just contrast that, where it's like there's all these conditions and prerequisites just to get in the room with these experts. If you contrast that with the vision of the church, the reality of the church, where old and young are both in the room together. The old are sharing wisdom. Those that are younger are bringing like passion and their dreams and like a vitality to the community. Everything's free. Like there's no strings attached. Like, you know, the couple that did my premarital counseling, they were in their 70s and they just sat with us and told us stories about their life, gave some incredible advice, and then stayed in relationship with us through our first years of marriage. Like that was free. Like that was out of the overflow of their heart. Amen. And that's how discipleship happens. It's life on life. It doesn't come with hoops, you know, like humans love to create hierarchies and hoops. And it's the same thing when people brought their kids to Jesus thinking there weren't any hoops to jump through. And then suddenly the disciples create these hoops and like Jesus doesn't have time for them. And Jesus immediately tears down those walls and says, don't create barriers so that they can come and be blessed by me and so they can come sit with me. Like let the children come. And in the same way, God says to all his kids, like do that for one another. Like I've made it possible for you to come to me freely, but also like be one. Like those that have a lot should sit with those that have little. Those that are young should sit with those that are old. Those with a lot of experience should sit with those that are just starting out. And MLM creates what I believe to be a toxic hierarchy that holds wisdom captive until you somehow jump through these hoops. And again, the church offers it for free.
Well, I mean, it's such a beautiful picture because I think even like I serve in my young adults ministry at our church. I do the FPU group, which is super fun. And as someone that has a degree of status or wealth or whatever, it's a huge blessing for me to serve and just be present and available, accessible without any hoops. Like I'm very accessible in my local church to the guy that's maybe 10, 15 years younger than me, just dating and just needs some guidance and a big brother to kind of help him along. That is to me is as much of a blessing to be available to folks than it is for folks who may have access to someone that's a season or two ahead or where they may want to aspire to be. So I'm totally with you there. So let me tell you a little bit about my background.
I want to know what product I can buy from you.
There's no product.
Do you still have boxes of supply?
No, it's never like that. So all my friends did it while I was in my senior year of high school. And right when I turned 18, I got recruited.
Prime age.
And I got recruited into, at the time, it was called prepaid legal. Now it's called Legal Shield. And basically for $25 a month, $30 a month, you can basically have certain legal services accessible to you. Reading contracts, if you get pulled over, you had like a little card, you could say, hey, do I need to call my attorney? And there would be like a paralegal available for you. It came along with a free estate planning will that they would do for you. So it wasn't a bad service if you needed anything legally related on a very basic level. It can go very deep, but on a basic level. So I ended up, there was 5 levels, associate, senior associate, manager, director, executive director. And I ended up within 6 months becoming a manager. So I was like in the halfway point because I really thought like, oh, this is a good service for $25 a month. It's worth it to have this around in case you ever need someone to read a contract, someone to do this, right? And what I didn't like was the constant need to recruit your friends and family. Like that felt iffy.
Was that pushed on you a lot?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So like outside of it being a good service, like the building the team was the way you really made money in it, right? Like you could set up a bunch of meetings and just sell it. And it was, the advances were good because they were advancing you for a year of the service. So you sell it, someone signed up for $25 and they would advance you for whatever, $250 or something like that. And so I made money. I had built a team, but I kind of was hit with this epiphany of like, this is useful in terms of understanding how sales work, in terms of understanding how to manage my time, in terms of understanding how to change my mindset. Why am I selling someone else's product? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I early on was like, well, I say I want to make music and art. Why don't I just take the good from this and transition it into selling my own stuff, which then I literally just started selling tickets to my own concerts. Hey, I'm throwing a concert. I need you to buy a ticket for me. Yeah. And so then I literally became the guy that whenever I threw a concert, I knew I could sell 200 to 400 or 500 tickets, literally on my own by just calling all my friends and family and asking them. And they were way more excited to buy a ticket, a $20 ticket to go to my concert than they were to pull up to some stupid event and get this rah version. And so I extracted a lot of like practical wisdom and like books and like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and like those sorts of, you know, books that were valuable. But I never liked the model of like selling someone else's product that it may or may not need, but you're not even really selling the product. You're really selling them this dream of financial independence. And so, yeah, I did it for 6 months, did okay at it, bounced, got, you know, started doing my own music thing. Yeah. And I was done. Maybe it wasn't even 6 months because I think my first album came out in May. And by that time, so I started in December, May, I was done. I was like, cool. And so like I never looked back and I just never went. And I've been people try to recruit me for stuff. And I'm just like, why? Yeah.
Like recently?
Yeah. Like people from different sales companies.
You're a prime candidate. You got a YouTube channel?
Yeah. Insurance companies that are like, I'm like, I don't want to sell whole life insurance. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I'm good. I got my term. So anyway, so I've seen some utility from it, but I generally agree that I think it's whenever you're selling someone a dream, I just feel like that's icky. You know, when you're selling someone an opportunity, not giving them the tools to build their own dream or build their own opportunity, but like actually selling them the opportunity, I think is just super icky. Yeah.
So is this a good time to let people know that Bless God is structured as an MLM?
No, there's no element. We've thought about doing an affiliate thing for like an affiliate program where people get discounts for like using their code. Like we've thought about that, but that's not the same as an MLM. Tesla has an affiliate thing, right? Like where you're like a loyalty member, or you can get someone to buy a car under your little code. That's not Amazon. That's not the same as like we're selling the opportunity to sell the thing, you know?
Yeah. And it's complex, man. I mean, because people saying MLM, like there's so many iterations of that. And so it's not, again, I think I already said this, but it's not wrong to sell stuff and to recruit a team or things like that. What's most concerning though is the vision that is being sold and how it's being pitched as discipleship and as following Jesus. Like there's a couple in our church who was kind of getting into MLM and the dude's a total evangelist. Like he just, whatever's on his heart, he's sharing. And I thought this pastor's word to him was really good. And he's like, hey man, you really only have margin to be an evangelist about one thing. And so previously the guy couldn't stop talking about this incredible ministry that he leads, but that started to shift to the MLM pitch. And to this guy's credit, he recognized it. And because he held this ministry so dear and it was like his life, he's like, well, if anything's threatening that, I don't want to be a part of it. And so he let the MLM piece go. And that may not be everyone's story, but I think we underestimate, or rather we overestimate that we can have multiple gospels that our lives proclaim when in reality, like whatever matters most to you is what's going to come out. And so if every conversation, that's my fifth point, is that recruiting builds relationships. But like if every conversation has an end goal or an end game, however you're justifying that, like that it's going to somehow turn to the business, you just need to ask yourself, is that really genuine? Because real discipleship can only happen without strings attached. Otherwise, how do people know where you're coming from and what your heart really is if it always ends with a pitch? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just dangerous to toy with people's souls, especially in an age that's already skeptical about Christians. that sees the scandals, that's like, these people always have like some weird angle or some hidden secret, to be walking around like couching our business pitch with gospel language seems really stupid.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's interesting. So when I was in it, it wasn't quite this. It wasn't this weird.
It was just the business aspect.
Yeah. And granted, this is over 20 years ago. I turned 18 in 2002. So this is a while ago. So the culture seems to have shifted. But I think you're right. Like the overlap of it, it just feels weird.
Well, I have a theory about it. Okay. So like what's crazy is when I talked to my dad, who's in his 60s, he was experiencing, he got pitched. And it used to be like you would invite people over for dinner and then you would like demonstrate the product. But I think what's happened is that some of these MLM organizations have recognized that the church is fertile ground because they're tightly relational, tightly connected communities where people are doing life together. Like the infrastructure is already there. They just have to sort of infiltrate it. And the church, and so they've changed the language from just pure business, make a lot of money. They're like, well, millennials and Gen Z, like they're skeptical of institutions and they're not as materialistic as maybe previous generations were. They're not as enamored with that. What they care more about is purpose and meaning and belonging. So they've adapted the script to appeal not just to younger people and that vision, but to Christians. And so that's why I think all of that Christian language has crept into MLM.
Yikes.
And it's like, oh, it's the same thing. Like following Jesus and discipling people, that's the same thing as like bringing in or like building your downline.
Yeah.
Like,
okay. So how do you now approach the rejection? If someone's approaching you, how do you approach the rejection? Do you have a conversation about it, or do you just kind of like, hey man, it's not for me, and they tend to leave you alone?
Yeah. So I've been on a journey in that, and I'd say I started in a more immature place where I try to shock them and throw them off. Now I think a much more gentle approach that, because I don't want to play games with them. Like in the same way that I don't enjoy that.
Sure.
I don't want to do that to other people. And some of these people are fantastic. Like a few that I know who are still in MLM are servant-hearted, very genuine people. And I could say nothing against their character, even though I would push back on the methods that they're using. But yeah, I mean, what I'll normally do is I'll listen for cues, and there's a couple of them. The first one's really sad. It actually happened to us yesterday. We were at...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, we didn't get pitched yesterday.
Okay.
But this experience happened. We were at this park with our kids.
Yeah.
And for the second time, we had met this lady earlier with her kids. She went and sat right down next to my wife. So the first cue is friendliness. How sad is that?
Super sad.
That we now have walls up. We have this radar up because we've literally been pitched a dozen or more times. And anytime someone strikes up a conversation, so in a coffee shop, this dude asked me about my food.
Yeah.
In the grocery store, they complimented my sneakers. At a farmer's market, I don't know how this guy knew this, but he walked up to my wife and I and was like, "Are you guys Christians?" That was his in.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's the first one, is just like people in modern culture, unless you live in like the hospitable South or something, or the Midwest, like here in California, most people just walk by each other. So it's like someone being very intentional to talk to you. The other cues are unsolicited like life advice. So like sitting at lunch and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, someone will say something like, "It's crazy how many people today like don't really have a purpose for their life." And they turn that corner and you're like, "Hey, MLMer, like now I've identified you." Another really big cue is talk of mentors. So I've heard that one many times where it's just like, yeah, so I have these mentors, and literally my wife has like nudged me under the table, like, "Oh, like again," you know? So I'm giving away the playbook.
Yeah.
So if anyone watching this is an MLM and you want to hide your methods, figure out a better way to start conversations. Don't mention your mentors and don't drop random life advice like you're a sage, just out of thin air, because that's weird. That'd be like a Christian being like, so Matthew 21 says, like in the middle of a conversation, like, it's just awkward.
Yeah.
But anyways, when that happens.
So stay away from friendly people.
I don't play around. Stay away from friendly people. I don't play games. So I will literally say, oh, are you with? And then I will name one of the organizations that, for me at least, in my experiences, 8, 9 out of 10 people work for. And what my friends who are deep in this have revealed to me is that I actually name like the higher up organization that most of them never talk about. Usually it's this other branded organization. So when I name this one, and I had no idea this until my friend said, they're like, oh, if you're dropping that, then you're definitely throwing them off. Like they're not used to hearing that. And I will say, like, I get wide eyes and people are often like just really shocked that I'm naming it right off the bat. Like, how do you know that kind of a thing? And so, but I think that's honest.
Yeah.
I'm not leading them on. I'm not like playing with them. I'm like, oh, do you work for them? And then it totally disrupts their spiel. Whatever they were like, so they'll usually like gracefully bow out of the conversation or they'll want to know more. Like, how do you know that? Who do you know? And then I'll tell them, I'll just name all these people that I've met and know, and almost without fail, like they know their names or they know them personally. So I'm super direct. And what I don't do is try to tell them,
it's a bad idea.
Get out of this.
Yeah, you're getting scammed.
No, I did that the very first time. And
statistically speaking, you're not going to make any money in this thing, right? Like 98% of people never make the money back that they invested. You don't do that?
It's a fool's errand. I came out really strong the first time and I was like, you need to get out of this, man. And I handed the book back to him. And that was probably unwise because like, I'm not going to convince someone.
Sure.
Someone
you just met at the park. That's
not my job. What I can do is be kind to them. Be straight up and hopefully give them some things to think about. But like, I would never send them this article because like, you know what I mean? Unless they were really curious or in crisis. And I have friends who hit that point, but I've asked them like, would any of this have changed your mind? And they're like, no, because we're conditioned. Like, number one, like we have to listen to so much content from within the organization. We don't even have time to be looking outside. But even if we do hear about things, it's like, they just don't get it,
Jeez. Okay, man, that's heavy. So if you're in an MLM, I don't know what to tell you, like, just make sure the product is good. Make sure you love the product and you're actually selling the thing instead of selling the opportunity. That'd be my biggest advice to folks in that world is like, make sure you're selling the thing and you love the thing and you use the thing. And that's the business. If that's the business, I'm not mad at you. I actually met somebody recently that said they do really well by selling a product that replaces your household products on a subscription. And that product they use, they love. It's an easy pitch because they're literally just selling whatever you buy at Target from the pagans. We have the alternative to that. It gets delivered to you. You don't got to go shopping. And they really love the product. And they've done a great job of building that up. And I don't know if they sell the opportunity as much, even though it's structured like an MLM. It's like the anti-woke, quote unquote, approach to products, right? It's like all these corporations are woke and they're bad. So we're going to give you an alternative to buy all your household amenities.
Yeah. Every case is different. And I think, at the end of this article, I say like, have clarity in charity. So like, don't jump to conclusions just because someone's in MLM. But I'll be real, I have yet to know someone who's deep in it who can make a convincing case to me that it's a healthy lifestyle and in a good way to disciple people. And again, that's my sticking point is the conflation of like discipling people and making money.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. So let's move on. I want to talk about, you wrote another article for the Gospel Coalition, and it was specifically about dropping the God told me card or the God said card. Let me see if I could pull that up. This is something that's so prevalent. I got it right here. Be slow to pull the God card.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you walk through the God told me to date that person. The Holy Spirit led me to take this job. God spoke last night. God put it on my heart. I had a dream and God told me is one that I hear all the time.
Yeah.
And you basically lay out this idea that a spontaneous thought is not God, that just because you feel something doesn't mean that you're hearing from God. Walk me through some of this and just kind of your concern here and the heart behind this article.
Yeah, totally. The first thing to say is I do believe God speaks.
Okay, good. So you're not a cessationist.
I'm not a cessationist.
Yes.
And a lot of people reading this probably were because of where it was published. And I love my brothers and sisters in that camp. But I am not a cessationist. So for those that are already mad at me, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we're careless with the way we describe hearing from God. And we're not bringing the things that we think God is saying to us into community where there's a healthy dynamic of checks and balances. And like you can pull the God card to like baptize any decision you want in God's will, whether it's wise or not. So I was a pastor for over 10 years and I've just learned through that, like how often people will say, oh, well, God told me this, God told me that. I think what I would encourage people to do is to just slow down a little bit and to bring things to those in their lives that can bring wisdom, can bring perspective. So I talk about like the vocabulary we kind of just apply to everything. Like, God told me to do this, or he led me to do that. I actually think there's a much more beautiful vision of how God calls us to live. So a great example is, I think sometimes we think of God's will as a maze that we have to navigate. So his will says, turn right here, make a left here, make another left. Okay, now turn around. And if at any point we mishear him or we ignore his will, suddenly we're off course and life just tanks. And that's a pretty dark, scary, intimidating vision of life. And I think God's goodness is much more profound. So I think God hasn't put us in a maze. I think he's put us in a garden. And within the garden, he said, you are free to roam and enjoy all these gifts that I have given you. And yes, there are some boundaries, some things that I've asked you not to do. But enjoy that freedom. So if you want to like go enjoy an apple from that tree, go for it. If you want to enjoy a pear from that tree, so he's given us the freedom to make decisions, like to pray about things. Yes. To discern. Yes. To bring them to community. Yes. But should you go to this college or that college? I think you do your homework, you pray about it, and then you make a decision.
Yeah.
Knowing that you cannot outmaneuver God's providential hand over your life. Like he's got you. And it's only when we put that pressure on ourselves that I have to have a specific word from God for every decision of my life. That just puts you in a dangerous position. So I would say, look at God's goodness. He's given you freedom. The two greatest commands are to love him and to love others.
Amen.
As long as you are living under that banner, filtering everything through that lens, then if you become a doctor or a teacher or a stay-at-home mom or a remote worker, or you take that person out on a date, like as long as you are filtering it through love God, love neighbor, you can act with confidence, knowing that it's not going to fail.
Well, I also think like the God told me card is so dangerous. I've had people tell me God told them it's okay to divorce their wife. I've seen people publicly have meltdowns around joining cults and then have to go back to apologizing to their pastor who they disrespected while they left their cult, while they joined a cult. I've seen the wildest things, and it's usually connected to this, like, I hear from God directly. Your first point in this article, and we don't got to go over it in detail, you talk about isolation and how it's fertile ground for bad theology, and the need for like a healthy local church that'll point you to God's word, because ultimately God's will is in God's word, and God's word reveals God's ways. So to me, what you're saying, like in a garden, yeah, absolutely. So like, should I date this person is usually the wrong question. The question is, can you date this person in a way God would have you date this person? And if you can date this person God's way, healthy boundaries, protect their heart, protect your own heart, not cross intimacy lines, then explore and see if you want to date that person to get married. Are you dating that person for casual because you're bored? Or are you dating that person because you actually want to get married with them, right? Potentially get married to them. And so I think it's like the ways of God usually are going to keep you in the will of God instead of like your own feelings and intuitions and thoughts about something. You know, and that's often found in not in isolation, but it's found in Christian community.
Yeah, that's so true. So there's this crazy documentary called Thread. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this guy in Colorado had all these issues with people in his town. And so he basically fortified this bulldozer in secret, turns it into a tank, literally, and then drives it out through the wall and starts bulldozing down buildings in his town to seek revenge. And it's just a crazy story, but what really grabbed me was that he recorded all these like sort of manifesto thoughts, and in all of them he was saying, God commanded me to do this.
Jeez.
And that's an extreme example, but I think it does illustrate the point that when we're isolated, we can convince ourselves that anything is God's will. So he was using, quote unquote, God's direction to justify this violent, crazy act. When in reality, no, it was just him seeking revenge on people. I think as extreme as that is, it does illustrate the necessity of having people around you that are like, hey, actually, I think you're just wanting to do what you want to do in this situation. Or they might say, man, I think God is in this with you. Yes, you should pursue that.
Yes.
You should go for that, you know?
Yeah, and I think ultimately your third point is like avoiding accountability. If someone says, well, God told me, that's the ultimate trump card.
It's a conversation stopper. Like, what do you say to that?
God told me it's cool, man. And it's like, wait, what? You know? And so even if you point people to scripture, they'll still contort and manipulate scripture if they really feel convinced like God told them something. Yeah. And your last point, talking about fear of failure, many walk through life paralyzed by decision-making or burnt by past failures and therefore won't make a choice unless it's unmistakably stamped with God's approval, quote unquote. Unpack this a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think, again, what's dangerous about pulling the God card is that, let's say, okay, God told me that I'm supposed to have this job, and then you don't get it. What do you do there? That just puts you in a terrible position where you either have to say that God lied to you, or that you misheard him, or equally bad that you messed it up somehow, like you sinned or you didn't listen to him enough. And so, yeah, he did promise you that, but he went back on it, and now you have to figure out, like, God does not play games with us like that. Like, he is kind and he is clear and he gives us so much freedom. So when you don't get the job, rather than beating yourself up or questioning God, he's teaching you something. And as a good father, like, he's leading you somewhere probably better than what you had hoped for in the first place. Or he's showing you maybe you're not ready yet, and there's some character stuff or some experience he wants to sow into your life that's going to help you be prepared. But the last thing we need in the midst of life's disappointments is questioning, did I disappoint God? Or can I somehow not hear him because I'm not good enough or holy enough? He's just kinder than that.
Yeah.
He's our shepherd who's leading us. And so he just wants us to take one step at a time.
Yeah. And I love where the article ultimately lands is that we should be walking around in clarity, mystery, and humility. There's a tension there of all the above, right?
Yeah.
There's a mystery to God's will, but we need to walk in a sense of humility, and through his word, through community, we can have some degree of clarity.
Absolutely. And I think that mystery piece is hard for us because we want to fill in the blanks and be like, this is what God is doing or what he wants. And so I think that's what leads a lot of people to say, God told me, because they just want to have that settled in their mind. when in reality, God oftentimes lets us risk. He leaves us in the unknown for his purposes.
Yeah.
And we actually can't fill in that blank. We don't always know why he's doing it, but what we do know is that he's good and he's kind and he doesn't waste any pain in our lives. Yep. So if he allows us to experience something really hard, and we can't explain why, we can rest in his promises still. We don't have to like iron out why it's all happening. I mean, there's really hard stuff I've gone through, huge disappointments that I still to this day couldn't explain to you. But I have seen the fruit in my life of what God's produced in me. And someday I get to know in full, like here's what was going on.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's good. Guys, Will has something really cool for you guys. It's a free resource of sorts. Those of you guys that are hearing this conversation, you're like, man, I want to share something with the world. I want to improve as a writer. I want to maybe put out a book and start sharing these ideas. So he's going to share that in a moment with you guys. But before he does that, without giving away too many spoilers, can you give some insight on the two projects we've been working on together? One is my book that's going to come out next year. But before that comes out, we just did a 60-day devotional together called Occupy Till I Come, around the same theme. I kind of sparked it. You co-wrote on some of it and really helped bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, I'm super excited because I like interactive stuff. So it's going to be a 60-day devotional journal, like hybrid. So give people like some of the behind the scenes and the process of us working together, what people can expect without, giving away too much.
Yeah, totally. So behind the scenes, Ruslan is really difficult to work with. And everybody should just know that. Like, don't believe the hype. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was great, man. So you called me like maybe a week before, we jumped into this devotional project and you pitched it to me. But I think something that I'm always looking for is a way to like structure my time with God, like specifically my solo time. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about what we put together is that, number one, it takes you through the whole narrative of Scripture. Mm-hmm. So from Genesis to Revelation. Mm-hmm. And the Bible
in 60 days.
In 60 days. Yeah. And the Bible's intimidating for all of us. Yeah. Like, we love it. It's a big book. And so I think where you chose to hone in on these like key pivotal moments in the story of Scripture are great. So if people complete the 60 days, they're going to have this amazing panoramic view of the Bible and the story from start to end. So that's valuable. But then for me, the real magic also comes from the discussion questions and the space that we've provided.
Yeah. And you really killed it on those discussion questions. You kind of took the little bit of stuff I had. And it was a very interesting part because I had like the skeleton and then I gave it to you and then you were like, hey, I need more stories. Yes. And then you were still able to keep everything nice and condensed. And then you really revved up on the interactive journal prompts that I think you crushed.
Yeah. So like people who get this devotional, what you're going to find is 3 just thoughtful, reflective questions. And it's really nice to be able to like, if you carve out like 5-10 minutes to do this each day, to sit down and have these like curated questions for you that are going to help you process like what God is teaching you through his word. And also like what season you're in. I think sometimes with distraction and the pace we all run at, like we don't actually give ourselves that gift of just pausing, like bringing our full self to God wherever we're coming from and just saying like, God, I'm here. I want to receive from you. I exist for you. Like just having that moment and knowing the right questions to ask. Like life's crazy. Life's busy. So I think people will be blessed. Like when you hit day 60 and you look back, like you're going to have a catalog of what God has been doing in your life for a couple months. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. What insights can you give about the book without spoiling it?
The devotional or the book?
The book, the actual book that's going to come out next year.
The big guns.
The big boy, the big body.
Yeah. Man, I don't know what I can give away. I mean, we could tease out little things, but I mean, I could talk about what I respect about you. And that is, number 1, that you love Jesus. Number 2,
nailed it.
What you've built as an entrepreneur, as an artist, as a YouTuber. you know, the way that you've structured your business, the way that you've built a team in an economy that's hard and difficult to do things like that. So kind of like if you want the perspective of an entrepreneur who takes following Jesus really seriously, but who also wants to like teach you some of your best practices, lessons. And it's really more than just business. It's like, how can you have a holistic approach to your life that is simple, that is actionable, and that's going to help you reach your goals if you're in business or just whatever your vocation is, like to help you do it in a way that blesses God and helps people. So I think it weaves together those different threads of like personal discipleship, entrepreneurship in the crazy world that we live in, and like becoming more marketable with the gifts God's given you. But then also like just nurturing your overall health.
Yeah.
You know, all those things are woven in, and I don't want to give any more.
No, that's good. That's a great teaser synopsis. Will, you have something very special that you've been working on for a while that I've personally been blessed by it. That I think can be a huge asset for those folks that are hearing this and they're like, ooh, like that sparked something in me that makes me want to add goodness and beauty and use the power of words and narrative and story to usher in goodness. Tell them about that because I want to make sure that those of you guys that are like, man, this sparked and stirred something in me, that you guys have access to it. I read it every time it goes out. And so what can they get directly from you to hopefully kind of encourage them and give them guidance in the journey?
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about like big corporations and smaller organic movements. And I work for one of the big 5 publishers, but I have a real heart to develop writers. I love coaching writers. Like we just did this devotional together and I was like really in it with you, like shaping your ideas, helping craft the language, come up with questions. And I do this regularly with writers. So I founded something called the Writer Circle. And the idea is that a lot of writers feel trapped on the outside of publishing. Like they're looking in, but until they do something cool or they somehow prove themselves or get all these followers, they can't be in the conversation. And I'm like, I want to do away with that and give away the best practices, principles. Like as an insider in publishing, I want to help writers find their way. And so the Writer Circle, the primary way to jump into what we have going on is our newsletter. So it's writercircle.co, and you just sign up for the newsletter. And every week I send out a actionable writing tip that you can read in less than 5 minutes. So it's short, it's punchy, but a lot of my audience, they're under contract writing books for publishers right now. And they've emailed me saying, hey, when I read this, I went back and changed a chapter.
Yes. Yeah, I have as well.
Totally. Yeah. And that's really the hope is to equip you. Yeah. The newsletter is free, but that's a great jumping in point where I just want to be your weekly writing coach in your inbox. Yeah. And even if you don't want to write a book, if you are an influencer and you're writing captions, like I'm being totally serious. Writing has so many applications. If you own a business and you're having to communicate things, like writing is such a skill, and people know the difference between AI and something that's coming from you, your mind, your heart authentically, and to be able to write faster, to be able to write in a way that grabs people's attention, and just to communicate compellingly, like that's what the newsletter is all about. So you just sign up and then you get it every Saturday morning. Yeah.
And you're right in that, like, I don't know if I told you one of the chapters we were working on, like there was a newsletter I got from you and I was like, ooh, let me go back and change this. And I rewrote a whole story in the book based on the newsletter I got from you. I don't know if I told you that. So maybe I'll tell you offline. So nice. writerscircle.co. We'll have that in the link and the description and the pinned comment below. Sign up for that. Totally free weekly newsletter from Will. I think you guys will be blessed by it. And I'm going to go over with him right now to the Patreon exclusive segment of our conversation. It's a little too spicy for YouTube. We're going to be talking about all the lunacy that's happening here in our home state of California and why Christians should or shouldn't be fleeing California. Some of the crazy stuff that's happening on a global scale with the political stuff and the election. We just don't want to talk about it on YouTube. And we'll see you guys on Patreon.